Welcome to Must Read's interview series, sponsored by the Perkins Center for Preaching Excellence. I'm Wes Allen, and I'm excited to have with me today a returning guest, the much published Ronald J. Allen. Ron spent much of his career at Christian Theological Seminary teaching preaching and Bible, and he's retired now, but still writing vigorously. Ron, welcome to Must Reads.
Thank you, Wes. It's good to be among Methodist clergy again.
Well, the book we're going to be talking about today is your uh, book, You Never Step into the Same Pulpit Twice, Preaching from a Perspective of Process Theology. Now, you've been an advocate for process theology and preaching throughout your career. Well, it's a short interview, so we obviously don't have time to explore the complexities of process thought. But I was wondering if you might start off with just a brief word about why you find process theology appealing as a way of understanding and interpreting the Christian faith, and why others might find it appealing as well.
Well, I might get right to the point and say that process offers me a way of understanding our faith that is credible or believable in view of the scientific way in which many of us interpret the world. As growing up, I had the same questions that so many do regarding the Bible. Miracles, really? Uh, what can I really count on God to do, and what can I not? And process poses a way of understanding how God is present and at work in the world, and yet allows for a scientific way to think about, and yet is congenial with the scientific way of understanding what really does or doesn't happen.
Mm.
So process came to me as a way of answering this fundamental question: what can I really believe will be true in what we now sometimes call our lived experience?
And what does the word process itself mean in process theology?
Well, it means that all things are ever evolving, ever in process, and it alludes to the fact that God is involved in the process, though because of the process theology nature, conception of the nature of God, God does not control the process, but God is a part of it. And we contribute parts and God contribute parts, and that's how we move forward.
Okay, so let's turn to preaching. Your concern in this book is about preaching from a process perspective. So, how does process preaching differ from preaching in other theological camps in the Christian traditions?
Well, there are really two ways people go about appropriating process theology for preaching. I subscribe to one of them and not so much the other. The one to which I do not give much attention is trying to find themes of process theology in the Bible and in Christian tradition. To be sure, in a certain way, they are present, but the Bible was not the first document of process theology. The second way, and it's the way I typically go about it, is to view the Bible and texts within the Bible as invitations for possibilities that can come about when we cooperate with God as God is present and working in history. This means I don't try to find process theology in the text, but I ask how the text can be an invitation and how process theology can inform the way in which I understand and respond to that invitation. So,
So,
of every text, for instance, I would ask the question, what does this text ask me to believe and do? And then I have criteria from process theology that kind of define the limits of believing and doing. And I bring the text into conversation with these things and then articulate what I hope is a credible, believable invitation to participate with God in becoming.
gotcha. So the first way, which is not your primary way, would be like looking for imagery of God that shows God changing.
That's
God changing
right.
God's mindset. But this one is reading any text through the lens of process theology, which brings me to a question about another theme that's run throughout your career, and that's a hermeneutic of mutual critical correlation from David Tracy, background in Paul Tillich before that. But that's not particularly a process theology hermeneutic, but you bring those together and have throughout your career in doing this book. So I wondered if you wanted to give, just again, it's a very complex matter, but a little teaser about what MCC is and how you view it in relation to process preaching.
Well, you make a very good point that mutual critical correlation is not tied innately or in any limited way to process thought. Mutual critical correlation, however, does have a certain process theme in the background. Tillich advocated so famously correlation, that is, finding something in our contemporary experience that correlates with the world of the Bible, and the preacher was always expected to find this correlation and proclaim it in the pulpit. But Tracy and others have noted that there are things in the biblical tradition and in Christian tradition more broadly that are not commendable. They are not consistent with what we believe most deeply to be true about God and God's purposes. So instead of assuming a one-to-one or a then and now, you the traffic traveling one way on the bridge, you think of traffic traveling two ways. There is the otherness of the text that we bring into our setting for conversation. And then in the process of conversation, we may discover that there are things in the text that are not compatible with our worldview or our deepest convictions about God. So instead of just bringing the text forward, we criticize the text. And that's why it's mutual critical correlation.
Well, thank you for that. So instead of just taking contemporary questions and finding answers in the ancient tradition, it goes both ways. There are things that we should be questioning back there. And from your perspective, you do that through a process lens.
That's correct. It would be possible to have mutual critical correlation, as I implied earlier, with another theological family as the correlating family.
Well, Ron, I appreciate you taking some time to introduce your book to our audience. It's an important book. I think it offers people a different way of not only thinking about God, but thinking about preaching. So I would like to encourage everyone to go get a copy of this and work through it. Thank you, Ron, for taking some time. Thank you all for watching, and we'll have another must reads coming up soon. Take care.